Broadcasting live from Lothal. Good morning, Lothal. It's the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Good Morning Lothal, the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. I'm Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora.
How we doing, Rolly?
I'm good. How about yourself?
We're doing just good, man. We're doing just good. It is a hot one out there today, so I'm very glad that we're inside and not burning up outside in that hot Lothal sun, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm coming to you guys on location today because the issues we had last week with the internet, that was on my end, so played the safe card I got with P. I was like, you want to do it in person? We're not quite at that video capability yet,
right?
But a friend of mine was kind enough to lend me his pad so that I can appropriately get a good audio and video quality for you guys. But it's funny that you say hot because I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I'll change my background to kind of show that I'm not in the same spot. Like on our video podcast on YouTube, I have like this Rebel Yavin 4 background. So I was like, as I was browsing before I got on here, I was like, let's choose hot. I saw hot as an option. And then you're like, it's hot. So I was like, okay, I'm glad I didn't go with that option.
Yeah, that would have not made sense exactly. But so as always, we are here to talk about the fantastic show Star Wars Rebels. So this week's episode is what was this? Number 13, and it was called Call to Action. But before we get to talking about that, let's see what's happening around the galaxy.
Let's see what's happening this week in Star Wars.
All right. So big thing this week, Kenobi Finale. Everybody's talking about it. I haven't stopped thinking about it. Pretty sure I'm speaking for Pete on that one as well. But
we are one week away, 1 week past it dropping, and it changed the landscape of Star Wars forever. I'm being a little bit dramatic, but you know what I'm saying.
I don't think so, man. I was talking to my buddy about it yesterday. We're gonna recap it, guys. Just some initial thoughts here. I was talking about it to my buddy yesterday, and I kind of almost felt like I watched a full Star Wars movie in like a 40-minute episode.
Yeah. Like
Deborah Chow did an insane job on this finale. And I was kind of scared, to be honest, because I think of Game of Thrones. When I saw the penultimate episode, the episode 5, I immediately thought of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, their stunning episode was always the penultimate one, the episode before the season finale. And the season finale was always like the transition episode. Not much was going on. It was the aftermath of like this big old shocker from the second to last episode, and then it transitions over into, the following season.
Right.
And I was like, how is that going to work here? Because I got the same like shock value in episode 5. So how is Kenobi, given the fact that, like we spoke about before, I'm assuming the original intent was that this was going to be a one series type thing. How are they going to wrap things up after such a insanely awesome episode 5? Well, they managed to do it, and I think they captured it in the essence, like what I'm saying. Like it captured the perfect tone of a Star Wars movie from beginning to end. How did you feel about it?
No, I couldn't agree more. We had been talking as the weeks were going on that it did seem as if this was written as a singular movie, like a 2.5 hour movie, that they just kind of like fluffed up some certain scenes and elements just to make it into a 6-part series that it ended up being. But yeah, no, man, from beginning to end, specifically that last episode, it did feel like we got closure, we got more twists, we've got a cliffhanger, so to speak, I guess you could say. We got everything that you could possibly ask for out of a movie, let alone, the final episode of possibly the last episode of a series, but I don't think so. I really think that it's that has already been decided behind the scenes at Disney.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, before we get into that kind of transition or talking about potential season 2, which I do agree, it looks like that's kind of the case. What was your biggest takeaway from the episode? Like, what was your favorite moment from there?
You have to go with the duel, the final fight between Vader and Kenobi. That was just visually, an amazing scene. But honestly, it felt good that we finally got to see Leia back home. Like the whole point, the whole backstory or like bedrock of what the foundation of the series was, you know, Kenobi's trying to rescue Leia and take her, get her back home, but to finally see her back being treated like a princess again, being, you know, pampered and whatnot, being back on Alderaan, that to me was a real feel-good moment. That earlier in the episode, there was a scene where basically Kenobi promised to like come back to her, not to let her, you know, not to let that be the last time that she ever sees him. And he was a man of his word, and he showed up, and that was just a really lovely moment where he returned her droid and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I love how he gave her the holster from Tala.
Yeah. That was cool.
Yeah, and it was just like she totally embraces it, and I love the comedic part that they put in that too, where she's kind of looking at it, and Obi-Wan's like, you know, you're 10 years old, Leia. You didn't really expect I was going to give you a blaster. Right. It's just the holster, but she, you know, she embraces it. She embraces it so much that at the end there, when she's now becoming what she was rejecting in the very first episode when we saw her, you know, she wanted to go out and play. She didn't want this senator role that her parents were grooming her to be. And in that moment, when he gave her the holster, you know, not only did she embrace who she was, you know, she added, you know, the rebel part to her look, and that was the holster. So I thought that was like a really cool thing, because it kind of it kind of highlights her outfit in A New Hope. She does have like the utility belt where she has her blaster, aside from her like white regalia, so to say, as a senator. Yeah. So that was actually really awesome. And yeah, I absolutely loved the interaction and the closing moment that she has with Obi-Wan in that scene, and basically promising her that, you know, that's not going to be the last time that they see each other. And the part that absolutely devastated me, like, again, talking about almost like crying, is when he proceeds to tell her that she has the characteristics of both Padme and Anakin. I thought that was so cool. I knew he was going to say the Padme thing, but then when he followed it up, he was like, but you also have, you know, the passion of your father. I thought, I was like, man, that is like so cool. That's at the beginning of the series, I was comparing her only to Padme, but then when Obi-Wan like includes Anakin in that, I was like, man, yeah, she really is both of them put together.
Right. No, I mean, and okay, let me admit something here to you. Maybe it's because I just turned 40 last month. You know, I feel like I'm getting older. I feel like, you know, but dude, I have become like weepy these days. Like there's just, I don't know, like I hope it's not like a permanent thing, because like, I don't know, I'm not a very emotional person, but the last month or so, like, man, like I'm getting misty eyed at the drop of a hat. So a lot of those moments between Leia and Obi-Wan, they were choking me up, really. Like, yeah, I'm not kidding.
Yeah, because I mean, you're a father, Pete. I think it's that simple. Like, we're both of us, we're already at the age where you're thinking legacy. And I know I don't have kids, you know, but I have my nephews and my niece, and I think of, when I see things like this, I think of them, and it's like, you really do want to pass on like the best qualities and characteristics that you have to, you know, your legacy. And those moments were awesome because, you know, Leia doesn't have that moment. Her and Luke they never got to spend a moment with their parents, but Obi-Wan is reassuring her, like, you are both the best of your mother and your father put together. So it's a really awesome moment, because you can tell, you know, she's already, you know, the person that she is, but those words with Obi-Wan truly might be the beginning of defining her future path, her accepting her role. So you kind of see, I can easily see how you can relate that to real life. In every conversation, and this goes to anybody out there listening, every conversation that you have, you know, with your kids, like, you want to make sure that you instill the best, like, characteristics about you, because you want them to be successful. And you know, not to get too emotional here, but I really do see this stuff the same way. And it's super common to see in, you know, in Star Wars, because we see it so often with these young characters that are being groomed right before us in whatever show that we're watching. So it really is an awesome moment when you can relate, you know, fantasy, what you're a fan of, to real world issues. It's like that time I told you a few episodes back, like when Yoda speaks, I think he's speaking to me.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of like my position on that. So I think it's awesome. It just shows that we're very passionate about Star Wars, and I'm sure we're just like every other fan out there in the same manner.
Right. No, you nailed it right there. So that's why when you said, what was your biggest takeaway, or however you phrased it, and of course the fan in me that wants to say, well, shit, that last fight scene with Vader and Obi-Wan was just amazing. Yeah. But in my core, just full circle of seeing that relationship that was forged between Leia and Obi-Wan come full circle. He made his promise to not only Bail Organa, but to her, to not forget about her, basically, and to come back. And it was a beautiful moment, and it kind of nails that. It makes those words, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope," so much stronger, because now we have this foundation, this bedrock on which to place that iconic line on. So it was just an awesome moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, my favorite moment from the episode was probably the duality you see between Hayden Christensen and James Earl Jones after, or rather during the fight, when Kenobi kind of slices the helmet in half. That moment was very powerful for me, because I'm such a huge fan of Rebels, and it reminds me of a future episode in season 2 called Twilight of the Apprentice that I'm going to save that conversation for when we get there. But a similar thing happens in that situation, and Vader in the Clone Wars and in Rebels, Vader and Anakin are voiced by James Lantner, but they did the same thing. When the helmet was sliced in half,
right,
you heard the overlay with him and James Earl Jones, and in this case, it was Hayden Christensen and James Earl Jones, and it was just so awesome.
That was amazing.
The fight itself was insane. Like everybody, all the listeners, I'm sure you guys enjoyed it just as much. I loved the lighting that they used, the clash of the sabers in the dark scene, so where you can actually see the red and the blue tone of light just colliding with each other, and trying to almost fight for who's gonna succeed here. Ultimately that Vader's gonna survive, but it's the Vader that we're seeing in Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's not Vader, it's Anakin.
Yeah,
he still isn't over his master. That's why this is a revenge mission for him. That's why he's struggling in these fights with him. And we saw a glimpse of that, or rather we saw that same effect in The Force Awakens when Ben Solo was torn between, do I kill Han Solo or not? It was the same lighting effect. So it was really cool that they reused it, but now to talk about Vader. And I say that part where it's Obi-Wan fighting Anakin, he's not fighting Vader, because towards the end of the episode, when we see Vader interact with Palpatine, it's confirmed. Palpatine recognizes, you need to stop focusing on Obi-Wan, and we need to, move on with everything else, because he's recognizing that his apprentice is still Anakin. It's not Vader. So he has to control him and get rid of Anakin completely.
Yeah, no. And there's even a line where Vader / Anakin basically says, I'm not remembering the line exactly, but he says, Anakin's gone, Anakin's dead. He just basically puts it out there, you're looking for somebody that's not here anymore. I'm all that remains, or however he said it. I wish I remember.
Yeah, I believe he told Obi-Wan, he was like, you didn't fail Anakin, or you didn't kill Anakin, I killed Anakin, which is really cool, because that's what Obi-Wan tells Luke in A New Hope, that he tells him,
right,
Darth Vader murdered and betrayed your father. So they really kept on point with that. And then the other, just to kind of go through the rest of the episode, because there were so many highlights, we could spend the whole podcast talking about this. I loved the sequence with Reva's closure. I kind of thought that that's what they were going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't know how it was going to deliver, but I loved it, because we don't ultimately know why she chose to pursue Luke the way she did. She doesn't know that Luke is Anakin's son.
Right.
She just knows that Obi-Wan had a mission to protect Luke. So she goes there, and in that moment when she could basically go full dark side as away from the light as you can be, in the same similar method that Ben Solo killed Han Solo. I keep saying Ben Solo, Kylo Ren. He's Kylo at that moment. The same way that Vader kills Obi-Wan, the same way that Vader kills the younglings. Like Reva saw the opportunity to get rid of Luke, and nobody was there to stop her. It was all her.
Right.
She recognized, this isn't me. Like, this is, I saw my friends die in the same method. We were helpless. They're here. This is a helpless boy. His life is in my hands. What am I going to do here? Am I going to fully succumb to the dark side, or am I going to do the right thing? What I was born and trained to do, as a Jedi. And sure enough, like she doesn't go through with it. And Obi-Wan then arrives and basically tells her, forge your own path. The same advice he gave to the Jedis, except now it's like it's a clean slate for her, to so to say, now that she's back to the light.
Yeah.
So I really loved the character arc that we got with Moses Ingram throughout the entire series. Became a huge fan of that character. I hope that we do get to see her in the future to some extent.
Yeah. The whole point that you made of like, and then Obi-Wan arrived, like it was like, had she not had that change of heart and decided to break the cycle, and like, the rest of the series wouldn't have even have happened, because she would have killed Luke right then and there, and it would have been over. But she did have that change of heart, like you said, and she saw herself in that helpless and, terrified child. And, it was, you're right. It was quite the story arc and closure for her. What did you think? I saw some complaints online about the editing of switching back and forth between the big dual fight scene and that scene being intercut with each other. Like, did you think it particularly took you out of either scene, or did it just intensify it more for you?
I don't think so. I didn't really look for any criticism on the episode. I loved it so much, so this is kind of the first time I'm hearing about it. But there are like nuances that as you're watching a movie or a TV show, you recognize that, and you're like, well, I'm being distracted. I don't know why. And I didn't get that effect. I was just so like enthralled with the entire episode. So I'm assuming that I perceived it to be okay, since I didn't really put much thought into that.
Me too. I mean, I didn't think so either. I just, upon reading, recaps or reviews of it, that's one of the things that was in more than one of the recaps and reviews that I read, which is people were not upset, but they were bothered, or they felt like each scene should have been given its spotlight, I guess, so to speak. But I didn't see a problem with it. I think it added more to the intensity of what was happening in the story. But
yeah, definitely one thing I have like two major points that I definitely still want to talk about, since this might be the last time we get the chance to talk about Kenobi. The scene where Vader buries Obi-Wan in the rocks. And he's able to use the Force, overcome it. At this point, Obi-Wan is now Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's no longer this shadow of what he used to be.
Right.
But that moment for me was so powerful, because he thought of Luke and Leia. That was that was what he used to power himself to get out of there. And the reason I say that is because, or rather, the reason that was a huge point of emphasis for me is because it's truly these kids that are saving both Obi-Wan and Anakin. In this series, you basically see at the beginning where Obi-Wan is like, he's not himself. He has shut himself off from the Force so much that he's changed as a person. Well, guess what? A 10-year-old child who just so happens to be the child of his best friends that are no longer around is now saving him. She is the one that brings him back to the light. He never goes to the dark side, but he cuts himself off from the Force completely, to the point where he's not the same person. And it's this little girl that ends up saving him. And coincidentally, it's Luke Skywalker that saves Anakin. He brings Anakin back to the light, brings balance to the Force. And it's just, I thought that was like super interesting, the way
that is an excellent point. That is an excellent point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, so that I just loved how it was the kids who he thought about, and that's what helped him out of that moment. And these are the kids that define basically the entire Skywalker saga along with their father, Darth Vader. So it's just a really awesome moment. And again, really awesome that Leia, in my opinion, is so much more of a powerful character in the entire Skywalker saga because of this series. She was a big character. I don't want anybody to mistake me, but for me personally, like, she just shot up to top 3. And this is like 10-year-old Leia. I loved her in the beginning of the series. I love her even more that the series is over now, because you can see the imprint that she has on Obi-Wan's life, so much that she names her kid Ben.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, it's super awesome.
Excellent.
And last but not least, we're certainly not going to leave him out, Qui-Gon. The Force Ghost appearance of Qui-Gon was so on point.
Were you expecting it?
So I did. So I don't know if I said it on the podcast before or if I just talked about it amongst friends. There was something that I was not aware of. I was under the interpretation that Qui-Gon could not Force Ghost, because he says it in season 6 of Clone Wars when he's showing Yoda how to do it. He says, because Qui-Gon manifests himself as like a wisp, those orbs that we mentioned before, and he specifically says, I didn't finish my training, that's why you can't see me. So I was under the interpretation that we were going to hear Qui-Gon's voice but not see him. So before the episode, there was just so much talk online, like, are we gonna get Qui-Gon's Force Ghost? And I'm thinking, like, he can't Force Ghost. So I did research, and sure enough, it's actually canon that he does Force Ghost previous to the events of A New Hope. I believe the novel is called From a Certain Point of View, and it's basically short stories of the original trilogy, told from different perspectives of the characters there. And basically what happens is, or rather, it's a short story. I think it's called Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, which also coincidentally she wrote a novel about that. I hope I'm not mistaken on that. I want to give credit to the correct author on this portion of the book. But he does appear to Obi-Wan in that book, and because of that book, which is a canon novel, that's confirmed that he was able to Force Ghost. So when they showed him as a Force Ghost in Obi-Wan, it was possible. Even if, like, you were like me and you thought, well, he says it in Clone Wars, he can't do it. He does somehow learn to do it. So his appearance too was awesome, because I was kind of to go back to what I was mentioning with the kids, I thought he was going to reach out to Obi-Wan in that moment where he was buried underneath the rocks, and he did.
That it was going to be his voice that, like, shot him up.
Exactly. So when he shows up, I love the interaction, because he basically tells them, I was here the whole time, you just weren't ready for me.
Right.
It was kind of like real comedic, like very like, it was like Obi-Wan, a reflection of Obi-Wan with all the sass. So I thought it was a really cool sequence. I definitely think that is the lead-in for season 2. I think the way that they wrote it after I saw the scene was, okay, I could see how this could end the series on that note. I don't necessarily need to see any more, but you can definitely see how it can also go the other direction and lead into a second season, because now there is a story that can continue with Obi-Wan, and his master, Qui-Gon.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw him, I I wish that you and I were watching it at the same time, but that's impossible because you watch it like at 5 a.m. or something like that. But like I was nudging an invisible Rolly, and I was like, there he is, man, there he is, the boy. And I mean, we had just talked about how his birthday just passed and how he's 70 years old, and I was like, man, he looks really good for 70. Like, my God, like that's just further proof that Mr. Neeson is a hell of a guy.
Yeah, definitely. So if to all the listeners out there too, drop in our comments, tell us if we didn't cover something on Kenobi, like mention it, and we can bring up some talking points in there. We'll respond to the comments, get a conversation going. So it's definitely something I know Pete has mentioned we've been meaning to get going on one of our episodes. So we'll definitely make that a point here soon. We don't have any more series, unfortunately, until Andor, so we'll definitely need to, put some emphasis on some other things until we get there.
Okay.
And there is one birthday. Just want to point that out. Kenobi related. Joel Edgerton. He plays the Owen Lars in Kenobi, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. His birthday was June 23rd. He's 48 years old. So want to wish him a happy birthday.
Excellent. Happy birthday to you, Uncle Owen.
thanks for taking care of Luke for us. You know what? Okay, yeah, man, let's go back to Kenobi real quick. I just thought of something since we're talking about him.
Let's do it.
How awesome is Owen now compared to the old,
the old man, the
grumpy Owen we see in A New Hope?
Yeah, no, the definitely it breathed more life into that character, going back and meeting up with him and Beru were just like, man, they were just taken out left and right.
Yeah.
Just kind of.
I love how she was the one that got the guns as soon as Owen told her she's coming. And she's like, okay, well, we're not going to mess around.
No, it's go time.
The secret stash of blasters.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah, definitely painted a different picture on them. I feel like he was just the annoyed uncle who didn't want the burden when you see him in A New Hope. And then you see him here and it's like, no, he's mine.
No, he actually cared about him. He saw him as a son. And
yeah, it was super awesome.
It's unfortunate that the last time we see those characters on screen is, they've been murdered and burnt to a crisp or whatever. But like leading up to that, they definitely, this series did help redeem those characters and, like I said, add more life into them and make them a huge part of the story. All right,
so now shifting away from Kenobi, unfortunately, let's get into our continued segment from the past couple of weeks where we're ranking the trilogies. So this week we're gonna rank our favorite order of the sequel trilogy. So that would be Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
All right. I think it's your turn to go first this time. Let's hear it.
Did I go? Okay. Okay. All right. So I was telling you off mic that I had something to admit to both you and to the audience. But of all the Star Wars movies, all official, 9 of them, I have seen all of them. I'm going to say conservatively at least 4 or 5 times each. Okay, some of them way more than others, some of them less than others, and that includes Phantom Menace. But I have to admit something, Rolly. I have only seen Rise of Skywalker once, and I saw it in the theater, and I have never gone back to revisit it. And it is not because that I do not like it or I didn't like it as a movie, as a film. I guess I just never made time to go back to do it. I don't know. Life got in the way, whatever you want to say. But I've only seen that once. So I'm going to list that one as my third one, simply because of the amount of times that I've seen it. I remember there being some really cool things. And as a matter of fact, I started it. This is one of those moments where I didn't finish my homework. But I started it this past week. I got about 20 minutes into it, and I was remembering, man, this was a pretty good movie. Like, it starts with action, and I haven't gotten all the way through it. So I guess I've seen it 1.25 times. So I am going to have to place that as my third one, simply by default, because I have not seen it enough times to fully rank it. But I plan to change that. I want to go back and finally finish it, and maybe we can talk about just Rise of Skywalker next episode that you and I shoot. But
yeah, definitely.
So for that reason, I don't have much to say about it. So as a placeholder, I'm just going to put it as number 3. So in fairness, the only ones that I really can rank are the other ones. And I'm going to have to put The Last Jedi as number 2 also. Mm-hmm. And that is only because, I guess the easiest way to say why that's number 2 is because Force Awakens I can't tell you how happy it made me to be able to go back into the theaters and watch Star Wars again after all those years. That is why it's that same feeling that we were talking about. The same reason you said, Phantom Menace was higher on the list than maybe some other people might not have agreed with it, is because that is the first new Star Wars film in the last 20 years since the last one or whatever. I know that the timeline's not right. But I very much enjoyed it because it introduced me to one of my newest favorite characters from the new sequels, which is Kylo Ren. And it probably has something to do with the fact that, like, I too, personally, I idolized my grandfather. My name is Pete Salas III, okay? My dad is Pete Salas Jr. My grandfather was the original Pete Salas. Now, I idolized that man to no end. So I really resonated with the character of Kylo Ren. It also didn't hurt the fact that he was he was dark side, he was Sith. So, and you know how I am about my favorites. I resonated with the idea of just being in awe of this this mythic figure in your own family of a person to live up to, be it good or bad. It's someone that I looked up to. So I really resonated with Kylo Ren, so much so that like that was the first helmet, the Black Series helmet that I bought in a long time.
Nice.
I have a Darth Vader helmet, and I figured it was only right after that movie came out. Like I had to have the Kylo Ren helmet, and I put them up on a shelf right next to each other. And in between them, I put a picture of me and my grandfather from when I was a kid, because that's how strong like I felt and how much that movie meant to me. So I know that has nothing to do with the storyline, just about my feeling for it. But that is a long way of saying my number one is The Force Awakens. Yes, because of that fact alone. There were a lot of other great factors into it. Just watching Han and Chewie walk back into the Millennium Falcon, like that was just amazing. I really liked the character of Rey that we met, this poor orphan farm girl kind of a thing. It's the parallels to Luke were right there. Yes. It was a really good way of introducing this next set of movies. Now, where they went from there, that's anybody's opinion, but I truly enjoyed Force Awakens for what it was, which was a relaunch of a passion of mine, which is Star Wars. So those are my orders. So again, Rise of Skywalker, just because I've only seen it once. Maybe that might change by next week. Last Jedi is number 2, and Force Awakens is number 1.
All right. So for me, let me rank them first, and then I'll explain why. Number 3 for me is also Rise of Skywalker. However, the difference is I have Force Awakens number 2 and Last Jedi number 1. And we've spoken plenty about Last Jedi, and I'll reiterate some of that here in my explanation. But starting off, let me explain it in the best order that makes sense to me, like as far as giving my logic here. Okay. Touching on Force Awakens, that was just such a complete, fun, nostalgic Star Wars film. That you can rewatch Force Awakens, and it covers like so much that Star Wars is in one film. You have the nostalgia of the old characters. They're integrated so well, and they mesh with the new characters that show up. Mm-hmm. You see, the beginning of Rey. I am a huge Rey fan. I loved the new characters. I loved Finn. I loved Poe. There's just a lot of awesome in that film. Last Jedi, I have number 1 because I loved the originality of it, what they were doing with Rey's character, showcasing that she came from nothing, Kylo Ren telling her that. And the other thing that I really love about Last Jedi is the setup of what I thought Kylo Ren's character was going. I know that there was kind of like some criticism of Snoke, but at first I kind of saw it that way, but the more I saw the film, when I rewatched it, I was like, okay, no, I understand what's going on here. It was that I've spoken about the rule of 2 before on this podcast, and the intent of the rule of 2 is the apprentice always has to overthrow the master at some point, and he takes on an apprentice. Well, when he kills Snoke, that's in that moment where he didn't do it to help Rey, like to come back to light. He didn't become Ben Solo in that moment. That was the moment where he truly became Kylo Ren, in my opinion. Oh, wow. As soon as he kills Snoke, he turns to Rey and basically offers her his help to basically have her as his new apprentice. Kylo Ren at that moment was supposed to become the big baddie. Now, unfortunately, it didn't play out that way in Rise of Skywalker, and that's the main reason why I have it ranked number 3. I wasn't a big fan of the Return of Palpatine. I really thought it stole from Kylo's spotlight, his thunder. He could have still become Ben Solo in the same way that Darth Vader reverted back to the light in Return of the Jedi in the same fashion, but let him, be the all-powerful Kylo Ren that he aspired to be. So Last Jedi, there's so many elements going on there that I loved. I am a huge fan of Hermit Luke, especially now after I saw Obi-Wan, the parallels there. I just really like that film a lot. I think it gets a lot of undeserved hate. I think there's an expectation of what it should be. I think people look at Force Awakens and they think that every Star Wars film maybe should be that way. But I love that Last Jedi was like it was like the most like unique Star Wars film. It was so different from the rest of them, and I just really wish that that same feel continued into Ryze Skywalker, and it didn't. And that's why I have Ryze Skywalker ranked really low. What I will say about that movie, I said it last week, it doesn't matter how high or low these movies rank on my list, there's something from every single one of them that I'm rewatching once a month. I'm thinking about, I'm comparing it to whatever new Star Wars is out. One of my favorite moments in Ryze Skywalker is when you hear Rey talking or connecting with all the Jedi of the past, and I remember when I saw it in the theater, I hadn't seen the animated series, so I thought it was a super cool moment. And then I remember after I saw Clone Wars and Rebels, and I went back and rewatched this, and I saw that scene, and you hear Ahsoka, you hear Kanan. As soon as I heard Kanan's voice after I rewatched that show, that's my favorite voice that you hear in that sequence. So I think you're gonna get a kick out of that, since you haven't seen it in Ryze Skywalker, when you go back and see that scene specifically, because besides them, there is a couple other animated
voices,
characters that are in there. It's a really awesome moment. So I guess my point is, regardless of it ranking low for me, Ryze Skywalker definitely does have its moments. So again, just to repeat, Ryze Skywalker 3, Force Awakens 2, Last Jedi 1. If anybody listening out there was like me and they questioned, hey, I like Last Jedi and nobody else seems to like it online, just be yourself, man. Just everybody has unique, different taste. You're not the only person out there that really likes Last Jedi. I liked it.
You like what you like. Hey, real quick, while we're on Last Jedi, can you give me just like a dumbed down version? And I know I've looked it up, but like I'm forgetting right now. The character of Snoke, what exactly was he? Was he a Sith Lord also, or he wasn't referred to as like a Emperor Darth or anything like that? Like what was he?
Yeah, so he was basically a clone.
Okay.
In the same sense that Palpatine wanted to continue his reign. Well, he does, right? He comes back, but Snoke was meant to be another version of Palpatine. So I think we are going to get more into that between The Mandalorian Season 3 and Bad Batch. Both of those shows alluded to the beginning of the Empire cloning, and you can tell that was very much on Palpatine's plate, because he was it was so important to him that he either lived long or that his legacy, so to say, lived on through him. But ultimately, like, it was him that was in power, whether it be a clone or whether he had eternal life, like Plagueis, basically.
Right.
So I think we'll get more into that. I think in the shows, I'm kind of hoping for sure that we get a lot of that in the Bad Batch, because Omega, again, in my opinion, is the first Force-wielding clone, and I think that she exists as basically the beginning of what we're talking about. Palpatine's wanting to clone Force users, and I think she's the first one.
Okay, got it. So if that brings us to the end of that segment, then why don't we get to the synopsis for this week's episode of Rebels?
So again, this week's episode called Call to Action. In this episode, the Rebels attempt to hack an Imperial transmission tower in order to send an inspirational message of the hope of people of Lothal and surrounding systems. In doing so, they must contend with Imperial forces newly energized to destroy the Rebels by the arrival of a familiar face and an important government figure, Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah. We start with the infamous John Williams Imperial March theme, which was just awesome. That gets my goosebumps going as soon as and we saw a shot of like in our opening, there's a big, bright, colorful shot of Lothal in the daytime. That's how you're used to seeing it typically, but on this one, it started with Lothal at night with the Empire's coming, and the song, the music, it's coming, and and we start off with Grand Moff Tarkin, like you said. He arrives at the Imperial base on Lothal, greeted by Minister Tua, Agent Callus, and the Grand Inquisitor. The Imperial March plane, Callback to return the Jedi. He talks down to the three of them in their ineptitude to take down the rebel insurgents disrupting the Empire's industrial efforts on Lothal. So basically, he shows up and he starts cracking the whip on them and basically dressing them down and saying, you three have failed me for these three reasons. How are you going to fix it before I hand you guys your ass?
Yeah, and I love how the Inquisitor is standing there, and I got the perception that Inquisitor, who is a Force wielder, mind you, Tarkin was not going to be part of the, the dress down. And sure enough, at the end, he's like, "Don't think that I'm not talking to you either." So that was a really cool part of that. And what you mentioned, the callback to Return of the Jedi, I love that opening sequence because it exactly mirrored the beginning of Return of the Jedi when Darth Vader arrives on his shuttle to the new Death Star. It was the same, almost the exact same sequence, except instead of Vader, it was Tarkin. So after that, we kind of cut to our rebels, of course. And they show Kanan, Ezra, and Sabine escaping an Imperial chase on speeder bikes, and they're carrying some stolen supplies like they always are. So they get back to the Ghost, and they notice that the rest of the team is watching a transmission from Senator Travis, who, we just found out in the previous episode was actually working for the Empire. And the transmission is actually, they're pretending that he's recommitting to the Empire. And in the process of him doing that, he shows the rebels on screen, which is the Ghost crew, and he offers a reward to the public for their capture.
So like, as far as the series goes, this is the first time that they've actually been put on notice, put on blast, put as a wanted poster. Their images are actually out there. They have now officially become wanted by the Empire.
Yes.
Okay.
So when they see that, Kanan creates a plan for the team to send their own type of transmission. So in his point of view, he was like, well, if the Empire can do whatever they want, and put us on blast like that, why can't we do the same thing? So the Ghost crew's kind of like, they're not quite sure how he's meaning to pull that off, and he basically explains to them that they can use an Imperial communications tower to do it, and basically to communicate to Lothal and the local systems that the Empire isn't who they say they are. They basically counter attack what the Empire is doing to them. So we get some back and forth between the Ghost and Tarkin. Tarkin is obviously going to be such a huge character in this episode. And this next scene is insanely powerful. I remember when I saw it, I was like, this happens in Rebels? And this is like the third time I saw it. And I think I said it all 3 times. So they show Tarkin interrogating some Imperial officers who we've seen in some previous episodes who have encountered the Ghost crew. And they're just unsuccessful in capturing them, killing them, what have you, right? So he interrogates them, for their failures, and he explains to them that the problem with a Jedi leading that rebel cell is that it creates hope for people that they don't have to rely on the Empire. He deems it unacceptable, and these guys, they're pleading their case to Tarkin, telling him like it's not that big a deal. It's only 5 of them, and of course Tarkin's not having any of it. So exactly. So immediately they kind of show a specific view. I'm sure Pete will put it on the screen for you guys to check out. And they show the Inquisitor standing behind these 2 officers. And of course, he has a double-ended saber. So he just ignites the saber and it just like goes right through the skulls of the 2 officers. I was like, I cannot believe. People talk about like Rebels being the watered down version of Clone Wars because of the animation. I don't remember seeing a murder scene like that in Clone Wars. It was just so intense. It was awesome. Maybe I do have a Sith side.
No, it was awesome. It was awesome to see like such a brutality, I guess. And they didn't really even have to show anything. But yeah, for a Disney, what was this, a Disney XD show back in the day? Like that was pretty harsh for that.
Yeah, and it just kind of further emphasized it was way of Tarkin telling Kallus, the Inquisitor, and Tua, like, I don't care who you are, failure is going to have consequences. So right after that, he basically instructs Kallus to dispatch probe droids to all the known insurgent locations so that they can locate and capture this rebel cell. So again, now we cut back to Kanan, Ezra, and Sabine, and they're actually scouting the communications tower that they were mentioning that they're going to plan to attack for what they're trying to do. And they notice there's an issue, and they notice that the probe droids are already being dispatched like Tarkin instructed. And as they're hiding, Ezra kind of realizes that the speeder bikes that they were using, they're kind of parked by the side of the road, and that's where the probe droid is inspecting. So there's a really cool moment where he taps into the Force, like you see that his training is paying off, and he uses the Force to control a Lothcat that's off in a nearby field to attack and destroy the probe droid.
Yeah.
So they think that they're successful, so they get on their bikes and speed off, but unfortunately the probe droid's not fully destroyed, so he's still like capturing video. Yeah, and and the droid basically captures them speeding off on the bikes. So the droid, of course, reports that to the Empire. Kallus is now aware of it, and Kallus reports the activity to Tarkin. But Tarkin, he's kind of taken back by Tarkin's suggestion, saying like, no, you know what? That's their plan. Let them have it. Let them attack. We'll be prepared, and then we'll catch them off guard. Let them keep the element of surprise, or let them believe they still have the element of surprise.
Right.
And then he also asserts to the Inquisitor that he's going to give him an opportunity to redeem himself, and he asks that he captures Kanan alive. So after the crew kind of escapes, they go back to the Ghost and they're reviewing the plan, and they're talking through it, like how it's going to be executed. It seems like a really tall task, and Ezra recognizes this. But Ezra, who was kind of already like hyped about it, he's hyped about doing everything he can to do, regardless of how reckless it is. Kanan notices that Ezra is not so optimistic about this plan after all, like he seemed he was. So he kind of pulls him over to the side, like a good father would, and starts asking him what's wrong. So at that moment, it's Ezra confesses to Kanan that he doesn't want to lose his new family the same way that he lost his parents. We know from the previous episodes that Ezra's parents did the same thing. They sent transmissions against the Empire, and of course they were captured and punished for it, or killed rather. And Kanan reaffirms him that, hey man, like we've all lost something. That's why we're all here. That's why we're fighting the fight that we have. But even though we've lost something, it can't stop us from taking risk and moving forward. And when the time comes, we have to be ready to sacrifice something bigger. So Kanan actually confesses that it's not easy for him either. He makes reference to his master that she tried to train him to think this way, but he didn't understand it then. But now that he's training Ezra, it's starting to make sense. And he tells Ezra, I guess you and I are learning these things together.
Right. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about, being a father or whatever. Like it is really true what they say, like you'll never understand what your parents were saying to you until you become a parent. Like honestly, like it's, and I've seen that firsthand. So this was just another example of that.
Yeah, definitely. So they show the team, successfully break into the tower because the Empire allowed them to. Of course, that was Tarkin's plan. But they immediately realize as soon as they break in and they're hacking the computer so that they can send their message that there's reinforcements arriving by air. So Kanan orders Ezra and the team to go back inside because they run outside to see what's going on. And Kanan's like, you know what, guys, go back in there, finish the plan, but get to the tower. He calls Hera, because Hera's of course the ride. She's always the getaway pilot, and tells Hera, the guys are gonna go up to the top of the tower, pick them up, and I'm gonna hang back I'll be right behind them rather. So Kallus, he kind of steps off one of the transport ships and he recognizes Kanan instantly, and he says something to the extent of, oh, I've seen this, we've been in this position before. But the outcome's not going to be the same this time. And the reason he says that is because now the Grand Inquisitor is present with him. So basically, as the crew is escaping, Kanan is now going to get into a duel with the Grand Inquisitor to help them get away. So as they begin dueling, they show Hera pick up the squad, and she tells Kanan, like, hey man, we're ready to go. And Kanan's like, don't worry about me, just go on. And you can instantly tell Hera's just like, she's upset, she's distraught, she's not having it. And Kanan's like, just go, like this is the way that it has to be. So Kanan basically surrenders himself to the Inquisitor. He's just overwhelmed at this point, but you can kind of tell it's like he has a bigger plan, of course.
Yeah.
So when they capture him, Tarkin shows up and he starts talking to Kanan, but he gets immediately interrupted by Kallus, who tells him of the rebel success in getting control of the tower, and he proceeds to play the transmission that Ezra is currently broadcasting to Lothal and all the local systems. And I specifically wrote it down because I thought it was a really, really cool speech, and I wanted to read it verbatim. So again, the episode is called Call to Action, and it's basically it's a call for all the rebel cells to rise up. And it goes like this. He says, "We've been called criminals, but we are not. We're rebels, fight for the people, fighting for you. I'm not that old, but I remember a time when things were better on Lothal. Maybe not great, but never like this. See what the Empire has done to your lives, your families, and your freedom? It's only going to get worse unless we stand up and fight back. It won't be easy. There will be loss and sacrifice, but we can't back down just because we're afraid. That's when we need to stand the tallest. That's what my parents taught me. That's what my new family has helped me remember. Stand up together, because that's when we're strongest as one." So I thought it was a really cool speech, because in this first season of Rebels, there is no Rebel alliance that the Ghost crew is aware of. There's the beginning of an alliance. We haven't seen it yet. The show is called Rebels, and all we're getting is the Ghost, which is really cool. I love them, but this is the beginning of. This is what's going to really lead into the following seasons, where the grander Rebel Alliance starts getting put together.
Right.
So I thought it was a really cool. I remember when I saw this episode, I didn't really put much thought into it, but now that I've seen it 3 times over, yeah, I really enjoyed that moment. These little speeches that they do, even though they're animated, they stick with me. And this is probably one now that I'm probably going to revisit. As part of my monthly rewatches, which does happen. There's these scenes that I save on YouTube, and it's these are my favorite Star Wars scenes, and I think I just added this one to it.
Yeah, no, I could easily see where definitely the seeds of a stronger rebellion were sown with just this one speech, and the fact that it's being given by a child, basically, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. The element that they let Ezra, of all people, not Kanan, not Hera, who is already kind of part of the Alliance, speak. It's speaking from somebody. It's somebody who has, in their perspective, seen both sides, suffered the most. He lost his parents. I love that his parents were the ones that gave the original transmissions, and now their son is doing it. But he's basically going to spark the Rebel Alliance in that sector. So the episode kind of ends. As soon as Ezra says that speech, they show Tarkin give the order to destroy the communications tower completely so that they can cut the transmission. He doesn't want any words of rebels teaming together, to create an issue for the Empire. And he explains to Kanan, he's just so upset. He turns to Kanan. He's like, "You don't know what it takes to win a war." So basically trying to downplay their efforts of trying to build a rebellion more than just the small cells that are scattered throughout the galaxy. So after they show that, they cut back to the Ghost, and they show Ezra asking the team if they think anyone heard them. He can kind of tell he's not so sure. And Hera kind of reiterates to him, they did. And Ezra says, this is definitely not over, and Hera agrees. And that's where the episode ends.
Right. So we're basically left with a big cliffhanger, because Kanan is now in the hands of the Empire, and the Ghost crew is not that they're a ship without a captain, not literally, but the figurehead, the patriarch of that crew is it's in question whether or not they're going to see him again. So it ended in a pretty good cliffhanger for what was otherwise a really, really good episode of the season.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I didn't peg that this episode is one that I remembered. I'll be honest, but when I saw it, I was like, yeah, this one is not a filler episode. This is a really good, underrated episode as far as how I remember each season of Rebels. There's specific episodes that I go back to, I rewatch. So when I saw this one again, I was like, yeah, we're adding this one, specifically that scene where Ezra talks to my personal rewatch list. I really did enjoy this episode. I think it really sets up the coming seasons. And it paints another picture of how the Rebel Alliance was put together. When we see Rogue One, we see that they're fully formed, but there's cells that are doing their own thing. Speaking specifically of I forget the guy's name, the guy that Forrest Whitaker plays.
Saw Gerrera.
Yeah, speaking specifically Saw Gerrera, who is way more of your hostile rebel leader, and then even Jyn. They create that Rogue One group on the fly, and they're like, you know what, the rebels aren't going to help. We're gonna do it on our own, and it sparks the rebels to join the fight. So really awesome episode.
Yeah, no, overall an excellent episode. So that kind of brings us to the end of the show too. But before we let you guys go, didn't say it at the top of the show. I keep forgetting, and you keep putting it on the notes, and I keep skipping right past it because I just want to get to the action. But we've got to do some house cleaning here. Please want to remind everybody to like, rate, subscribe, share. Everything that you're doing is helping. Our numbers are growing slightly every single day, but they're growing and we're going in the right direction. And that's all because of you guys and the help that and the support. We really appreciate it. I know I speak for Rolly when I say that, but we really very much appreciate anybody who takes the time and effort to share, like, subscribe, rate. Also, anyone who takes the time to write a comment and, get the discussion started. Rolly's really good about asking you guys after he makes a point and maybe he's not sure on the point he's trying to make. If you know better, if he made a mistake, if I made a mistake in what we're saying, please let us know and start the discussion. That's the fun of this. That's why it's called social media. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've always been that type of fan who, like, I accept what I see on screen and I don't dig deeper. And there's certain, like, small details that don't stick with me. Everybody's built a certain way, right? So I absolutely love when I get to discuss with people. And I've never been the type where I'm like, how did I not know that? Like, I need to be better prepared for that. When somebody tells me something that I don't know, and especially when it's something like this that I love, I embrace it. And I'm like, man, like, you're right. Or I'm just that type of person. I'll have differences of opinion sometimes, but I feel that I get educated in this, in Star Wars just from talking to my friends. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I miss, and I'm not going to be one to say, I'm the all-knowing Star Wars person. I'm not. There's plenty of people that I follow on TikTok, YouTube. They're just so knowledgeable about Star Wars, and I rely on them so much for getting my facts straight. It helps develop my personal opinions. It's just, I love the fan base. Despite, forget all the toxicity. I think of Ryze. Let's talk about Ryze Skywalker. When Lando shows up and with all the rebels, he's like, and Poe's like, there's just so many of them, and Lando goes, yeah, but there's more of us. That's what I think of the Star Wars fan base when I hear that line. There's more of the Star Wars fans. They just want to mutually enjoy with other fans. So I absolutely love communicating and talking to everybody that has given us input to this podcast. I embrace all of it and appreciate you guys so much for the encouragement that you've given me. Pete gave me a lot of encouragement to do this podcast with them, but it's really brought out my Star Wars fanboy in a way that I didn't think could ever be brought out. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, I couldn't have said any better, so I'm not going to try. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Good Morning Lothal, the unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. Next episode is episode 14, and it's called Rebel Resolve. What do you think that's about, Rolly?
I don't know about the resolve part. I just know that I'm sure we're going to get some type of rescue attempt with Kanan, and of course we're building towards the alliance coming together, the Rebel Alliance. So I'm just going to go with that.
Most definitely. So if nothing else, then this has been Pete Salas along with
Rolando Zamora
saying, may the Force be with you always. And goodbye from Lothal.